everyone, it's Nicole McGurk for Lawn Fawn, and today I'm sharing a card that features Lawn Fawn stamps and dies and Nichol ink products. I am using the Let It Snow Lawn Fawn stamp set, as well as the Lawn Fawn stitched hillside borders and small stitched rectangles. To start my card, I wanted to create a really elegant card with what you might consider more fun or whimsical Lawn Fawn products, and I wanted to show how it's very possible depending on what papers and inks that you use with the product. So this is a very elegant card that's all whites and golds, one of my personal favorites for holiday decor and anything really. And I die cut 2 of these stitched rectangles from some smooth white cardstock, and I'm going to use one of them for my background right now, and then I will cut a snowy border from the other. The reason I do this is so that that great stitched detail is on those bottom 3 sides as well as the stitched border, so it has that continuous stitching design even when I layer on that snowy border. I've decided I will use this kind of sloping border, and I have masked off 3 of the sides. I love how it looks when it has that instant matte from the stitching to the edge of the die cut. And I used a pencil with my die to just kind of gently pencil in where my snowy border will go. That way it serves as a guide before I die cut that border and attach it. I want to do all of my stamping and inking. So I am using the Nichol Delicata Golden Glitz ink. This is a pigment ink, and it is personally one of my very favorite inks. The silver as well, if you maybe are more of a silver person. Both of them are excellent. I love them. They give that true gold or silver look. And I am using the 2 trees from the Let It Snow stamp set that are more of a solid design. And I'm using both first and second generation stamping to give the illusion of depth and dimension on what is actually a very flat card design. So this is one of my very favorite things, is to create that depth and dimension with second or sometimes even third generation stamping. Now, I didn't want that many first generation stamped images on my card scene here, but I need that second generation, so I'm using a scrap piece of paper to stamp off the first generation before I add that second generation stamped image to my snowy scene. So I wanted all my trees to have that kind of golden look. Now once I have those all stamped, I can go ahead and start adding in all of those other elements and layers to the design. This is the Nichol Sheer Shimmer Spritz in Gold, and I spritzed it all over the design to kind of give it that golden glow all over. It's a more sheer spritz or spray than maybe a mist product, so it gives a pretty translucent coverage, which is what I wanted. I was going more for elegant than and soft than very overwhelming and bright. Now from the Let It Snow stamp set, there's this really cute little mini border that has little snowflakes and stars. And so I went ahead and took my Delicata Golden Glitz ink again and inked up my background with the snow dots and stars. And anywhere there's a dot, I am using this awesome Nichol Irresistible Pico Embellisher, and this is in Wedding Dress White. It's a great opaque ink, and it has this really tiny nozzle, and depending on how hard you push, you will get little dots, or you can even write with it. So I am using little dots to cover up all of my little dots of snow that I stamped and making them white. Then I'm taking the tip and drawing in snow on those first generation stamped trees. not being real particular with it. I'm going for the more of an overall look than, being super specific. And I think that really works for this design. I love how it looks once it's all dry. There's even a slight texture to it. It's sort of raised, if that makes sense. I can't say enough about these Pico embellishers. I have not used them before, and I really like them for creating great techniques and things like this. So I'm going to continue to color in my last first generation stamped tree, and I really think that makes the scene. It really gives it that snowy feeling. You want to make sure and replace that cap immediately. It has that little needle already in there to unclog it. That way it doesn't get clogged up. So I'll pull off my masking material now because I no longer need that. And I am going to set that aside to dry. It's still slightly wet from the spritz, the shimmer that I added. And while that's drying, I am going to go ahead and take that other stitched rectangle that I die cut at the beginning of the video and create my snowy border. So I need the stitched rectangle and a piece of vellum. When I was die cutting these to start out, I completely forgot that I really love the look of vellum, especially for a snowy scene. And so I laid out my border that I was going to die cut, and I realized that I had forgotten to die cut the vellum. So I will die cut a piece of vellum really quickly, and that way I can die cut both the vellum and the cardstock at the same time. Again, I want that stitched detailing around my vellum border just like I did my cardstock, so I will die cut it with the stitched rectangle first, and then I will die cut it with the stitched hillside borders die. So I'm using my stamped rectangle as a guide to kind of make sure it's not specific. I didn't really line it up. I just kind of eyeballed it. And I'll set the extra aside because that could work for another project. And then it's a little bit taller than my original line, but that's perfect because it covers up my pencil line and I don't have to worry about it being seen. So there's what the bottom of the card will look like. It'll cover up any of that excess inking and anything that you don't want to see. So it really gives that pretty illusion of the white and gold holiday background. So now I need to stamp my greeting. I am using the Season's Greeting stamp from the Lawn Fawn Let It Snow stamp set with the Versamark ink, which is the watermark ink pad from Nichol, which Versamark ink is what I always use for my embossing. I find that I get terrific results with it. So I always like to take a powder tool first and rub that over my paper so that the embossing powder sticks only to what I've actually stamped with the Versamark ink. I will ink up the Season's Greetings with Versamark, and then I'm just kind of trying to eyeball it and center it on that bottom snowy border. I'll press that down, and then I'm going to grab a golden or a white embossing powder for the greeting and sprinkle that on and heat it up. I didn't really want the greeting to be too much different, I guess is what I want to say, from the rest of the card. So once I have that heat set, I decided I needed a little bit of gold brought into the bottom border of my card to really tie the whole thing together. So there's this great little kind of imperfect dotted border from the Lawn Fawn Deck the Halls stamp set. And I'm going to take that and stamp it right below the greeting. It's kind of a great little grounding type stamp set. I love that it's imperfect and not a straight little line of dots. And some of those dots will overlap the greeting, and I don't want the gold embossing powder that I'm going to use here to be on top of the white embossing powder, if that makes sense. So I'm going to tap off that gold, and I will show you what I did to get rid of any of that gold embossing powder that is stuck on top of the embossed white greeting. I'm taking a small tip paintbrush and gently rubbing off that embossing powder. and make sure it's not on any of that white embossed greeting that I've already done. And then I can heat set that here in a little bit, and you won't even know that there was ever a little dot on top of the white embossing. Before I do that, because I want to only heat it one more time, I'm going to take some of the little snowflakes and star images from the Let It Snow stamp set, ink those up with my Versamark ink again, and stamp those around the greeting. Just a small scattering, not too much. I kind of mixed it up with the snowflakes and the stars. And I'll sprinkle on the gold embossing powder for those as well. And then I'll heat set that. This is some gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp, and it's an ultra fine embossing powder, and I really like that and recommend it. I think it shows detail, especially for small stamped images, beautifully. So I only had one little snowflake to the left of my greeting, and I decided I did not like that. So I needed something else to kind of balance it out. I don't really want it to be too matchy-matchy with that side being so much shorter than the other side. So I did go ahead and stamp one more star, and I really like how that looks much better. Now once that's heat set, I need to attach the vellum to my cardstock snowy border. And I like to take the zig glue pen and add just small dots along the stitching. And then I'm going to hide a few back behind the stamped and embossed greeting and snowflakes. Just small dots will hold that in place, and then I will line it up and adhere it right over the cardstock border. And then if you place something heavy on top of that to kind of hold it in place, it will not curl up while that adhesive is drying. So I like to use an acrylic block to do that. I'll just set that aside for a little bit while I'm finishing working. One final thing, with simple little cards like this, or what look to be simple cards, I love to give them a slight dimension with some foam adhesive, especially if I'm using a lot of tone on tone where there's a lot of white on white. So my card base is white, my panel is white. Yes, it has all that great gold stamping, but to give it a slight dimension, I use some foam adhesive to pop up that panel. And then I will use some foam adhesive. There you can see that great shimmer and shine, and even some of that dimension of the Pico embellisher. Isn't that awesome? I love it. And then I'll use some foam adhesive here for the bottom border as well. Place a couple of little pieces here, and before I pop that up. This is very thin foam adhesive, so where it gives great dimension, it is not adding a ton of bulk, which is something that I'm very conscious of when I'm creating cards, because of course they're meant to be sent in the mail. I hope you've enjoyed this video showcasing Lawn Fawn stamps and dies and Sukaneko ink products. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.